Things continue to move on the Nintendo Switch 2 front as we apparently have a bunch of new games, third-party titles that are going to be ported to the system, or at least the rumors and the leaks are starting to happen that they're going to be ported over. So let's go ahead and start off with a new one here, and that is Final Fantasy 16. Apparently, Square Enix is trying to get the game up and going on the Nintendo Switch 2. So quick little flashback, guys, so we have proper context to what is happening here. Back before we even got the news that Final Fantasy VII Remake was coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, Nate the Hate did drop the bomb that Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming to the platform. There was also rumors, and of course Square Enix just saying that they were going to bring over their AAA games to Nintendo platforms and Microsoft. So the fact that we did ultimately end up getting the announcement of FF7 Remake was something that was definitely expected, but absolutely nice to have. But one thing that Nate did say beforehand was that Final Fantasy 16 apparently was not coming. Now, it was clear that it was going to come to the Xbox series of systems, and it did. They shadow dropped it the other day. But what about the Nintendo Switch 2? Looks like Square Enix is looking to get that game up and going, so we're going to talk about that, plus a couple other titles that we've already covered, but the chips are starting to fall in place, which is what's lining up to be a partner showcase. At least that's what I'm thinking as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into the topic here. So apparently, Mr. Naoki Yoshida, and creative director Kazutoyo Mahiro talked about, or more like hinted, that Final Fantasy 16 will be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2 at a recent event talking about the game's arrival on the Xbox Series S and X. Yoshida apparently said that there is, quote, just Nintendo's left when talking about platforms that the mainline Final Fantasy game is currently available on, with Mahiro saying he, quote, will do his best. Now, that's something that's definitely interesting because Final Fantasy 16 is a little bit, I would say, of spaghetti code. I'm not sure. It's optimized okay enough for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, but there's definitely some gripes that people have when it comes to the performance mode and the resolution, and even with the Xbox Series X version of the game and how the resolution kind of goes down to, I think, 720p when you're playing in performance mode. Quality mode, obviously playing this type of action game, not quite the best at the 30 FPS, although the resolution is a lot better. So there's some interesting dynamics with this game. Now, I played it on PlayStation 5, and I thought it looked okay when it comes to the resolution and the frame rate for the most part. Not perfect, but it was 100% playable and was still a fun game overall. I thought it was okay. Now, is it my favorite Final Fantasy, or do I like to see Final Fantasy games built this type of way? Not really. That's not what I want to see for a mainline Final Fantasy game, but that doesn't mean that the game is bad. So if they're able to bring it over to the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm not exactly sure how they get it done. I'm not a developer. I don't know what the technical specifications of getting this type of massive game ported over, because it is a graphically intense game. I'm not sure how it would work, but I'm guessing they would go based off of what they have already for the Xbox Series S version of the game and kind of fine tune and adjust and optimize from there. That's what I'm guessing they would have to do for this, since they did get it up and going on the Xbox Series S. I think that they can maybe make some concessions here and there and potentially get a okay version of the game out. And of course, anywhere that you want when it comes to portability, that would definitely be a bonus for people that want to play Final Fantasy anywhere. So I do think that, yes, Final Fantasy 16 does seem like they're trying. Now, there's also some precedence to this, because Square Enix tried to get Final Fantasy 15 going on the Nintendo Switch 1. Ultimately, they weren't able to do it because the compatibility of the engine that they had for that game just didn't fit well with the Nintendo Switch 1, but they did say that Unreal Engine 4 felt better and they were able to get a bit more headroom with some of their bigger titles for UE4. So I do think that with Final Fantasy 16, there definitely could be more wiggle room, considering that the Nintendo Switch 2 is more powerful compared to its other systems on the market when it launches, compared to what we saw with the Nintendo Switch 1 compared to PS4, Xbox One, and definitely when it comes to PS5, Xbox Series. So I do feel that this is something going forward that Square Enix might look into, because they're really teasing it right now. Now, this does kind of combine with some of the other stuff that I've talked about already this week. Stellar Blade, that game essentially not being confirmed, pretty much confirmed that they are looking into a port of Stellar Blade or essentially saying, hey, look, we're getting the first going of Stellar Blade on the Nintendo Switch 2, because they also gifted all their employees that. Apparently somebody from the development team or somebody from the team of Stellar Blade shipped up. They went into a forum and said, oh yeah, well, nothing's been confirmed, but we are kind of looking into things. So it does seem that Stellar Blade will be coming over to Nintendo Switch 2 at some point as well. And then there was also Lies of P, the developer Round 8. They also all got gifted Nintendo Switch 2 systems as well from their publisher, and that was also rumored to be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. So if you look at it right now, if you go based off of what Nintendo's already announced and the fact of the matter in terms of what they usually have around this time, it does seem to be setting up for a Nintendo Switch 2 partner direct. And I think that with the Nintendo Switch 2, partner directs are going to be far more exciting than with the Nintendo Switch 1, where people kind of dreaded those. There were a couple good ones that we did get, but people kind of dreaded them because with the Nintendo Switch 1 and what type of games it was getting when it comes to third-party titles at some times, people weren't necessarily excited or hyped. But with the Nintendo Switch 2, you've got a new platform, obviously a lot more powerful, and we're already seeing with games like 007 First Light, in addition to another title like Borderlands 4, that the Switch 2 can handle some of these current-gen big titles that are coming out. So if Nintendo does have a partner direct, it's going to be far more exciting to see stuff like Elden Ring, or to see stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or Final Fantasy 16, or Stellar Blade, stuff like that. Like kind of how we got that one direct, I think back in like 2021 or 2022, where it was stuff like Nier, in addition to Persona 5 Royal and all that. So bring it on. I think we're going to get a Nintendo Direct, maybe a regular Nintendo Direct or a partner showcase. One of those two I think are coming within the next number of weeks. But what else is coming is all the people that are going to hit that subscribe button if you're not subbed to the channel, as we've got some cool giveaways next month for Donkey Kong Bonanza. So hit that sub button, hit that like button, and let me know what you're most excited for when it comes to a potential big third-party game on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now let's go ahead and jump into the next topic here, and that is the Nintendo Switch 2 kind of absolutely dominating Japan already, because we've got some interesting totals that have came up with the Nintendo Switch 2 already, which I kind of knew was going to happen overall, but I think that it's even a bit crazier here when you look at it. So the Nintendo Switch 2 in Japan has already surpassed the total amount of the PS5 All Digital Edition and the Xbox Series X/S. So here are the totals from the bottom to the top. Xbox Series X Digital Edition has 20,000 units. Xbox Series X has 320,000 units. Xbox Series S has 337,000 units. PS5 Digital has 975,000 units. And the Nintendo Switch 2 already has 1.1 million units. And this does not count the My Nintendo Store sales as well, because this is tracked from Famitsu. So it's already outsold systems that have been out for almost a half decade at this point in simply just 2 weeks. That just shows you the juggernaut that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be when it comes to Japan. I see pretty much every Japanese developer and a lot of Asian developers, like we're already seeing Lies of P in addition to Shift Up and all that, Final Fantasy 16 potentially. A lot of developers are going to be targeting their games for the Nintendo Switch 2. There was a lot of discussion and talk about third-party sales and not enough announcements at the Summer Games Fest and stuff like that. Guys, we're just getting going. Trust me, a lot of developers got their kits a little bit later. We're going to see more games at Nintendo's direct showcases, partner showcases. There's going to be a lot more interesting reveals for third party and of course first party. So we are going to see some interesting developments overall. And obviously the Nintendo Switch 2 is off to a blazing start when it comes to the Japanese market, and I can see it hitting around Switch 1 numbers or potentially even surpassing the Nintendo Switch 1, considering what could come out for this system. There could be far more in terms of bigger third-party support from Square Enix and their latest games, in addition to Capcom and stuff that the Switch 1 just didn't necessarily get. So I'm looking forward to seeing everything that comes of this generation overall. But yeah, it's already off to a really big start when it comes down to it. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here, and that is Metaphor ReFantazio. Speaking of great Japanese titles, Metaphor ReFantazio, we've got a sales update with shipments digital sales topping 2 million units. So that's up 1 million from the last reported numbers of 1 million right after the game launched. So Sega Sammy had a recent management meeting 2025 presentation with some interesting things were announced and even leaked when it comes to the sales numbers of various different games from Persona to Like a Dragon and more. But I think one of the best things that I saw from this, for me at least, is Metaphor ReFantazio, my game of the year 2024, one of the best RPGs that I've ever played. Very unique, interesting game that I still think about and talk about all the time on my streams, and I still love and listen to the music too. I think some of the music is the best that I've listened to in a JRPG. But yeah, 2 million units overall, and I think that's pretty good for a brand new IP that's trying to do something a little bit different. That's not on a platform to where it could have got a lot more sales with the Nintendo Switch 1, but obviously this game's coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. I've got information that it is. There's been other people that have talked about how it's coming. I think that there's going to be some type of Metaphor ReFantazio edition or Royal edition when it comes down to what they're doing, and they're going to repackage it and put it out on the Nintendo Switch 2. We're obviously seeing those Japanese sales, and I think that there are quite a number of Japanese gamers who simply just did not buy the game because it wasn't available on the Nintendo Switch 1. It wasn't available obviously on smartphones or anything like that. So essentially all they had to pick from was PlayStation and Xbox, which is not bad. I bought the PS5 version myself. It's fantastic, but those two systems aren't as popular in Japan as what we see with the Nintendo Switch and smartphone gaming. So I do think that with Nintendo Switch 2, we've got a system that's far more powerful that can adapt the game. So I think they can actually get a good version of the game up and running on the Nintendo Switch 2 and sell that. And I think it'll actually do pretty well. I think it could boost it to 3 million units plus in due time when it comes to like the repackaging and the remarketing of the game, because it is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to that. That could also be a potential Nintendo Direct style of announcement. A lot of Atlus's big games or even ports were announced at Nintendo Directs. If you look at most of their stuff, SMT5, that was at the Nintendo Switch 1 presentation. You look at stuff like Persona 4, Persona 3, Persona 5, Royal, all of those announced at a partner showcase. You look at SMT3 Nocturne, that was announced at a partner showcase or Nintendo Direct. I think it was a partner showcase. A lot of the stuff, heck, even the re-release of SMT5 Vengeance announced at a Nintendo Direct. So Atlus and Nintendo have that type of connection to where they like to make their announcements at Directs. So I think that the sales move when they talk about how much it did at the meeting, coinciding with what's happening with the Nintendo Switch 2, and in addition to all the rumors that are out there, I think it's going to be happening. But I'm very happy that Metaphor has topped 2 million units in less than a year without a Nintendo Switch 1 version and a Nintendo Switch 2 version probably on deck here. So what do you guys think about Metaphor ReFantazio topping 2 million units? Let me know in the comment section. But now we are going to move on to Donkey Kong Bonanza, a game that I just keep on thinking about, and it owns my mind at this point because Nintendo has somehow got the file size down even lower than what they expected at first. Now, we first thought that this game was going to be around maybe 10 to 11 gigabytes in file size. Well, nope, no, that's not the case. It's down to 8.5 gigabytes in file size, which is incredible to say the least. I'm guessing that there isn't a ton of voiceover in this game. People always talk about Nintendo's optimization, and that's great, but I do think that Nintendo doesn't do a ton of voiceover in a lot of their games. So with less voiceover audio quality, you can get a lot lower file size because audio and high quality audio, also 4K textures and stuff like that, take up a lot of space. I don't think they're gonna have to really worry about that when it comes to probably using DLSS or some type of form of that to where it doesn't take up that file size and everything. So this is great. This is great for people who buy it. But one thing that I just want to say here, which is nuts, because I think that Nintendo, or more like this game, if this game shows that Nintendo needs to get a hold of the process when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 cartridges, or that they will when it comes down to the pricing and all of that and getting more developers to use it, I think this game kind of shows it, because Nintendo's taking, or more like eating, a huge space and cost with this cartridge, because this game is on a 64 gigabyte cartridge. We got the teardowns from Mario Kart World, and that's on a 64 gigabyte cartridge, and that's only about 20 something gigabytes. This game's only 8.5 gigabytes, and it's going to be on that 64 gigabyte cartridge. So I'm almost positive Nintendo does not want to have a 8 gigabyte game on a 64 gigabyte cartridge in terms of file size and space and everything. So I think that once they really get this process down and they get the manufacturing going, that they can actually make some adjustments to make the cartridges cheaper or to even maybe get some different sizes once things get going a bit. But we'll see about that in the future. Either way, the kings of optimization are definitely showing their teeth here when it comes down to it, because Donkey Kong Bonanza looks fantastic, yet it's only 8.5 gigabytes. And it does have some voice acting in there, but from what I saw of it, a lot of it isn't going to be really extensive voice acting, and they're not going to have crazy 4K textures and all sorts of crazy 7.1 audio and Dolby Atmos and stuff that takes up a lot of space in modern games. It's going to be a polished, fine-tuned, optimized game for a new system that people are super excited to play. So I'm looking forward to it myself. So what do you guys think about everything that we discussed here, from Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, all the different ports potentially, Nintendo Direct that could be happening, Japan and what's going on there with the sales? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.